Karibuni sana. My name is Ruth Kandagor. I will be your moderator for the day. And I would like to welcome each and every one of us today to this event where we get to share insights, we get to learn, and we get to contribute to the conversation on public debt management strategy in Kenya. I would like us to start off with the national anthem, and I welcome our communications team to lead us on this. May we please arise. Thank you very much. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered here to discuss, to unpack, to understand, to learn, and to share insights on the debt management strategy for the medium-term period in Kenya. Today, Your Excellency, in this room, we have representatives from different institutions, from government entities, from non-state actors, from international institutions such as the IMF. We have representatives from civil society organizations, and we have a team of panelists from the Treasury, the Public Debt Management Office, from the academia, Professor Chege. The team from IPF will share insights on research. And the intention why we have come here today is really to come together as stakeholders, to put our heads together, and to discuss on how best we move forward as a country. We hope that the discussions, the conversations, and the insights that we all contribute to will be meaningful in charting forward the debt management strategy and the approach that we take as a country towards enhancing our public finance management spaces. We are honored, sir, by your presence as a keynote speaker. We are honored, Bona PS, for joining us today. We are honored by all distinguished guests who have taken time to be with us today. Without much ado, I would like to take us very quickly through the program of the day and how we will run. We will have opening remarks, and then we will proceed to the keynote address and a presentation of the Mtds. We will have a brief plenary to discuss further additional insights from what we will have learned from the presentation. Then a plenary discussion or open question and answer. Then we will have the closing remarks as we wind up. We hope to complete our agenda today as per the program provided. I take the honor to invite our CEO, Mr. James Muraguri, for his opening remarks. Karibu.
Thank you, Ruth. Thank you very much. Our chief guest, Honorable FCPA John Buddy, EGH Cabinet Secretary, National Treasury and Planning, Dr. Chris Kipto, CBS Principal Secretary, National Treasury, distinguished heads from oversight institutions and government agencies, the National Treasury team, development partners, civil society, media and stakeholders present, good morning. It is a great pleasure to welcome you to this important breakfast meeting organized by National Treasury in partnership with the Institute of Public Finance. I extend my deepest gratitude to each of you for taking time to join us. Today we gather to discuss a matter of national importance, and that's public debt, and to engage in the dissemination of the financial year 2025-2026 medium-term debt management strategy. As a leading public finance think tank, IPF is committed to generating credible evidence for policy advocacy and intentionally for policy and action. We recognize the crucial role that debt plays in financing development, and further we recognize that principles of public finance must and should be at the heart of our public finance architecture. A key aspect of our public finance principles is public participation. Kenyans must not only be informed about debt policies, but also actively engaged in shaping them. Debt strategies should reflect the voices and concerns of the people, and that's why we are here to have a conversation with the team that spearheads our debt policies. For this to be effective, policy documents must be accessible and easily understandable to all Kenyans. To bridge this gap, IPF strongly supports the development of a citizen-friendly version of the public budget documents, and the Mtds 2025 is one of the many that are produced by the National Treasury. Simplifying complex budget documents ensures that all Kenyans can understand government budgets and actively participate in national discussions. At the Institute of Public Finance, we are committed to monitoring the implementation of the debt strategy to ensure accountability, fostering dialogue between government and the public, and advocating for policies that position debt as a tool for growth rather than a burden. I would like to take this opportunity to appreciate the government's strategic involvement in tackling the country's debt challenge, and the development of financial year 2025-2026 medium debt management strategy demonstrates a clear commitment to managing debt responsibly while ensuring continued economic growth. Today we'll hear from the National Treasury on how they envisage to run the 2025-2026 debt process. While at it, let me encourage our friends at the National Treasury that Kenyans have a lot of hope that accountability will remain at the core of management of our public resources. Moreover, let me also commend the government for fostering public participation in debt management, including the recently held public participation processes during the debt management strategy preparation process. Encouraging citizen engagement, which is what we are doing today, and actively considering stakeholder submissions strengthens transparency, accountability, and trust in public finance decision-making. We recognize and appreciate the efforts made to listen, adopt, and integrate public input into the national debt strategy. I therefore invite all of us as stakeholders to work together to ensure that Kenya's debt strategy translates into a real economic stability and prosperity for all of us. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ruth. I want to gladly invite the peers. Dr. Kipto, please come for remarks and kindly invite the CS on our behalf. Thank you very much.
Our Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury and Economic Planning, Honorable CPA John Buddy, CEO James Muraguri, Salim Kakir, IMF Press Rep in Kenya, Martin Mugambi, CEO of Citibank, Margaret Nyagango, Controller of Budget, and everyone who is here. Good morning. Habari zenu. We have our CS who is going to make a keynote address. So the team that has prepared for me notes here, please let's clap for them. no need to read or speak about what the CS is going to say. I'll only make 2 points. First is to appreciate the team that has prepared today's event and the input that the PDMO team has made to make sure that we have a report which CS is going to give more. But let me just give some context. That we talk about public debt because we have not achieved our aspiration as a country to balance our budget. Because if we balance our budget, where revenues actually meet all the expenditure needs, we don't need to borrow. And when we look at the history of Kenya, we have not been in that space where we have had a balanced budget. And in fact, the situation worsened as soon as we adopted a new constitution in 2010. If you look at the numbers, spending pressures have been much higher than revenue generation. To the extent that if you look at the year 2014, our debt distress was rated low, but by 2018 it had become medium. By 2020 we were rated a country of high risk of debt distress. And that is why we went into an IMF program in 2021. And the desire in that program was it was a revenue-driven fiscal consolidation aimed at checking or addressing debt vulnerabilities. I'm happy to say that we have made progress, but not enough. In 2020-2021, our fiscal deficit was 8.1%, very high fiscal deficit. The following fiscal year, 2021-22, it came down to 6.2% of GDP. The next fiscal year, 2022-23, it came to 5.6. And the last fiscal year, we settled at 5.3% of GDP. And then our aspiration this year was to go for 3.5%. But last year we had the challenges of Gen Zs, which led to rejection of finance bill, which meant we had to go to supplementary budget. And in that supplementary budget, we revised from 3.5 to 4.3%. We have implemented that supplementary budget until recently when CS went to Parliament again because spending pressures were higher than the revenues. And what Parliament has approved now is 4.9% of GDP. We are still, you can see that there is a fiscal consolidation. It goes from 8, come down up to below 5%. Over the medium term, we want to come to 2.7 by 2028. But if we can balance the budget, the better. So we are in the space of discussing on the revenue side how much to raise revenues while also containing expenditures. So I think that is the point number one that I wanted to just raise. And the second point is that if there is one thing I'm very proud of that we have done in the last 2 years as Treasury, is the decision we took to go to market on early February last year, when everybody feared that we were likely to have a sovereign debt default because of the 2 billion Eurobond. But we went to market. Thank you, Citibank and Stanbic. I think you helped us as liability managers. And it was a very successful issuance and buyback. We got very good bids, 6.2 billion. That was of a subscription of 4 times what we were looking for. That really the risk. And the fear that we were not going to settle was actually removed. And look what happened after that. The shilling came down with the actions of central bank. The shilling has been at around 129 down from 160s and has been at that level. Central bank has done monetary policy operations, and today inflation is low and many things are, you know where we are. And just 2 weeks ago, we did another successful liability management. Again, thanks to our liability managers, and it was very successful. So, CS, as you come and you've been our leader, we want to appreciate you because you have really brought in. There's one thing I really cherish about you is that you have opened up Treasury and you are communicating. You are doing better than all of us because you are a politician. And this is what we need from you. And so without taking more time, let me give the opportunity to you now to come and address us. Thank you very much. Pigia makofi tena.
Thank you, PS. My Principal Secretary, Chris Kipto, the Chief Executive, Institute of Public Finance, Mr. James Muraguri, my friend from our development partner, IMF, Mr. Salim, Patrick Mugambi, Karibu, and my sister, Controller of Budgets, with whom we work very closely, Team Treasury. At the Treasury, we are a team. I am just the team leader. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning. So let me give my official address before I say a few things off the cuff. You know, PS has said I'm a politician. I thought I left politics, but anyway, I am here. You can't really, I tell people you can't remove a monkey from the bush and make the monkey a goat. The monkey will always remain a monkey. So the reason why we are gathered here today is twofold. One is to pick out for note the key highlights of the 2025 medium-term debt strategy and to exchange insights and ideas as we disseminate our 2025 medium-term debt management strategy. Our gathering will therefore provide all esteemed stakeholders opportunity to further strengthen public debt management. The medium-term debt strategy is an annual publication that informs the government decisions regarding public borrowing and public debt management, as well as the desired structure of public debt portfolio in pursuit of our cost minimization, risk management, and sustainability over the medium term. The medium-term debt strategy is prepared pursuant to Section 33 of the Public Finance Management Act of 2012. The strategy recognizes that a diversified public debt structure and a deepening of the domestic debt market is necessary to mitigate against exchange rate risks on Kenya's external public debts. And I think you will remember there is a clear example, a recent example of the effect of this that we cannot forget. That by January 2024, our external debt stock was about 6 trillion shillings. Today, it is 5 trillion. It's not that we have paid back those loans. It is foreign exchange effect. So the 2025 medium-term debt strategy has been developed to guide public debt management over the period of 2025 to 2028. It outlines the strategies and initiatives aimed at minimizing costs and management of risks of public debt over the medium term. The 2025 medium-term debt strategy seeks to gradually reduce the stock of treasury bills in the medium term while lengthening maturity of public debt instruments and deepening the domestic debt market through issuance of medium to long-term debt securities accompanied by debt market reforms. From the external sources, the strategy targets a mix of concessional and commercial borrowing. I must at this juncture highlight the fact that the medium-term debt strategy analysis takes into account outstanding public debt and projected borrowing and the debt service in the context of the current and future macroeconomic environment and the conditions in the international and domestic capital markets. Ladies and gentlemen, as at the end of June 2024, the stock of public debt and publicly guaranteed debt was Kenya shillings 10.5 trillion shillings. This is 65.7% of our GDP. Today, that figure has risen. We know the latest data is that we have a total outstanding debt of 11, or debt stock of 11.02 trillion shillings. And this is equivalent, this one of June 2024, is equivalent to USD 81.7 billion in nominal terms, of which domestic debt was 5.4 trillion shillings, while external debt was 5.17 trillion shillings. The external public debt comprises multilateral, bilateral, and commercial creditors, while domestic public debt comprises treasury bonds and bills. In fact, out of the 11.02 trillion shillings of public debt, as at the latest data, forget about this historical data, about 5.9 is in form of domestic debts, and 5.09 is in form of external debt. Out of that external debt, 2.83 is to multilaterals, and 1.09 is owing to the bilaterals, and then 1.17 is the amount owing to commercial, in terms of commercial debts. As at the end of June 2024, again, treasury bonds accounted for 85% of total debt, domestic public debt, while treasury bills accounted for 11.4% of total domestic public debt. That percentage has not changed much from the latest data that I checked. Speaking to external debt, multilateral debt accounted for 53.9% of total external debt, and the bulk of it is owed to World Bank. The high proportion of multilateral and bilateral debt reflects the government's deliberate strategy of maximizing the use of concessional financing and minimizing the use of commercial debt. Government guaranteed public debt as at the end of June 2024 amounted to 100 billion shillings. The debts are held by Kenya Ports Authority, KPA, Kenya Electricity Generation Company, and Kenya Airways. Those are the three major parastatals where the government has guaranteed debts. The redemption profile shows that 18.6% of domestic debt will mature by June 2025, mainly due to short-term treasury bills or government securities falling due. Overall, the repayment schedule is bunched for the next 9 years due to large share of treasury bills and the near-term maturities treasury bonds, international sovereign bonds, and syndicated loans. I will speak to that a little bit later. The recent debt sustainability analysis indicates that Kenya's public debt is sustainable, but with a high risk of debt distress. The present value of public debt was 63% of GDP against the benchmark debt threshold of 55%. It is key to note that the National Treasury has until 1st of November 2029 to bring the present value of public debt within the threshold to comply with the law. Policy initiatives by the government are necessary to diversify and or expand export base and to build gross international reserves to improve the external debt sustainability ratios. So ladies and gentlemen, the 2025 medium-term debt strategy aims to reduce debt costs and risks by sourcing 25% gross borrowing from external sources and 75% from domestic sources over the medium term. We must be alive to the fact that external sources are shrinking by the day. The policy pronouncements in major economies, the world leading economy, you are aware, has already pronounced itself through executive orders. We are no longer looking forward to much support from that direction, and therefore we have to look inward and without, again, destabilizing our domestic market. From the domestic sources, the strategy is to gradually reduce the stock of treasury bills while lengthening debt maturity and issuance of medium to long-term debt securities. On the external end, the target is to have a mix of concessional optimization and minimal commercial borrowing. The implementation of the strategy will reduce the cost of public debt by reducing nominal debt to GDP to 57.8% from the current 63.7%, and the present value of debt to GDP from 58.1% to 52.8% over the implementation period, that is by 2027-2028 financial year. The expected composition of public debt at the end of the strategy period will be 45% external and 55% domestic. The government will implement the medium-term debt strategy through the annual borrowing plan. And the cost and risk outcome characteristics in the 2025 medium-term debt strategy will be evaluated semi-annually and annually against sustainability threshold indicators to determine deviations and suggest mitigating measures. The evolving public debt structure and fiscal deficit will inform review of strategy for management of costs and risk of public debt going forward. In addition, any deviations will be used to inform strategy review and formulation of the medium-term debt strategy in the next cycle. Ladies and gentlemen, Kenya's public debt management landscape has faced several challenges though. This includes sovereign credit rating downgrade that negatively impacted the financial terms of new commercial borrowing. Remember the rating mid last year. Such rating downgrades may lead to increased borrowing costs, limited access to credit markets, low investor confidence, currency depreciation, and debt sustainability risk. Another challenge is the external factors such as global market volatility and interest rate fluctuations. These affect the timing and potential cost of debt management operations. The high interest environment, both globally and in the domestic debt market, has also resulted in high debt service costs. The high interest on government securities was as a result of tight monetary policy environment, which is expected to continue to ease since the macroeconomic environment has greatly improved. However, the above challenges notwithstanding, the government will explore possibility of liability management operation options with the aim of extending the maturity of existing debt to reduce near-term financing risks and reduce the cost of debt service. In addition, measures to support a steady and strong outlook for exports will play a major role in supporting external debt sustainability for public debt to continue on a sustainable path. The government will continue the fiscal consolidation efforts to slow the rate of debt accumulation. Further, the government will continue to undertake reforms to reduce the cost and minimize risk of public debt, while also improving the institutional structure and policies to ensure efficient and effective public debt management operations. In addition, the government will continue to implement reforms aimed at promoting development and deepening of the domestic market to reduce cost of borrowing domestically. In conclusion, let me say that partnership between the government and market participants, including regulators, can lead to more effective market development and continuous improvement of Kenya's public financial management framework. Transparency and sustainability require supportive regulatory frameworks, investor protection, and innovative ways of doing business. With this, ladies and gentlemen, let me take this opportunity before I go to my off-the-cuff remarks to express my gratitude to my team at the National Treasury. I have a wonderful team and a fantastic team. I am supported very strongly and ably by my Principal Secretary, Dr. Chris Kipto. And I have also a debt management team led by Rafael Otieno. I don't think Rafael is around. But as I always say, Treasury is a team of equals. I am just first among equals. I don't know whether Chris is second among equals. But we are a team and we work very, very well. And I'm sure that we will still continue to serve in our positions to make life better for Kenyans. Because the moment we manage debt efficiently, effectively, the beneficiary is the people of Kenya. With our collective determination and dedication of all those present here today, we can build markets that are transparent, efficient, and impactful, capable of driving economic growth and fostering sustainable development. So I promised off-the-cuff remarks before I go to my last paragraph. You know, we have come from far. Sometimes we forget very fast. How did we end up where we are? I am aware that yes, there could have been decisions that were made at one point, decisions that probably have put us to high debt risk. More particularly, and without feeling shy about it, some decisions that were taken from 2014, coming all the way to 2019, have put us to serious debt distress. But we should not forget that there was a period in this country, and not just this country, the entire world faced challenges of COVID. At that time, a lot of decisions had to be taken to keep Kenya afloat. Every nation, every economy was concerned about the survival. Actually, that time it was basically survival of the people. And so decisions were taken. Certain loans were taken, which now we have to pay. And the government is in perpetuity. Let me tell you, it is interesting that our loan maturity, our loan portfolio, I always keep on drawing it in the air, that it is like this, meaning there is some peak somewhere. And unfortunately for us, who are in positions of decision making, we have just reached, the peak has just been reached when we are in offices. If you look at our debt portfolio in terms of, I don't want to talk much about our domestic debt. In terms of external debts, the most expensive debt is usually the commercial debt. And that commercial debt, up to the last liability management, which we did with the support of our leader rangers here, we had 6.6 billion outstanding in terms of Eurobond. And out of that 6.6 billion, 5.1 is supposed to be paid between now and 2034. So this is the period of paying 5.1 out of 6.6. 900 million, which was to mature by 2027, although 300 is to be paid this year, 300 was to be paid 2026, 300 in 2027. And the following year, 2028, we have $1 billion to pay of another Eurobond. So you have 2029, 2030 to breathe a bit. 2031, you have $1.5 billion. 2032, you have $1.2 billion. Then you rest in 2033. And 2034, you have another $1 billion. So if you add all that, it's 5.1 within that period of time. And the syndicated loans peer, which constitutes about over 320-something billion, again, this year alone, September, we have two. One, $200 million to pay, and another one, 75 million euros to pay. Then the following month of October, you have $46 million to pay. If you translate those three figures that I've just mentioned in terms of dollars, it's about $960 million this year. And it is the same story up to 2030 for syndicated loans. So this is the, if you are to call it, in terms, you know, I'm also a fisherman. This is the most turbulent period of our history. And that is why when I see people attack the government consistently or failure to deliver, then I recognize that we have not appreciated where we are. The country has not appreciated that this regime, this government, I'm told regime is dictatorial. This government, this administration is in office at very tough times. You know, you are coming to an office, and actually I pitied Kenya Kwanza, but I'm now in it. You are coming into office, and you have a deficit of almost $1 trillion in your budget. Chris, is that not correct? You come into office with over 900 billion budget deficit. And that is why Chris said the first 2020, 2021, the deficit was 8.1. It moved to 6.2 the following year, moved to 5.6, moved to 5.3. moved now, we wanted 3.5, which I think was a crazy imagination. And it almost brought civil unrest in this country. But now we are working with 4.9. What I'm trying to say is that we are at times that are not very easy. And we must show commitment to solving this problem. So how then do we solve this problem? The strategy, to me, is very simple. Number one is to consistently demonstrate that you are reducing your budget deficit to GDP ratio over the period to reach the target of at least maximum of 3%. If we can demonstrate that in the period, the medium term, going to 2027-28, we will reduce our budget deficit to 3. That is a starting point of reaching debt sustainability threshold that is acceptable and that we can be comfortable with. We cannot stop borrowing. It is a lie if we start saying, and Chris there, I want to disagree with you, we cannot balance our budget now. If you balance your budget now, you will not offer services to the people. And no one will accept to pay taxes if they are not receiving services. So we are in a catch-22 situation. You have debts to pay, you want to pay those debts by reducing expenditure. At the same time, people who are helping you to pay the debts are the same citizens who must demand services. If you don't give them services, they have no reason to pay taxes. And so we must balance these two to make sure that we gradually, consistently reduce our budget deficit as we offer services to the people of Kenya. Number two is to liability manage our debts, especially the ones that are maturing. Because if you ask me, I don't think Kenya has a problem of debt payment. In terms of debt sustainability, and sometimes we disagree with our development partners when they push us that we don't have ability to pay our debts. We tell them, no, you are wrong. The debt sustainability for Kenya is perfect. The only problem we have is that the maturing of debts is concentrated within a short period of time, which we agree, even with IMF when they question that this is something to work on. So long as we can demonstrate that we can manage our liability in the short term between now and 2034. By the way, I've realized that 2034 is not a very long period. Yeah? So 2034 is a very short period. I don't want to talk much. Allow me to end with this. My pet area. Fiscal discipline. Efficiency. Stopping theft. Let me now be blunt. We have called this thing control of budget, corruption. This is theft, plunder of public resources. Pardon? Easy. I like the way you have even made it easier. In Wizi Malia Uma. I want to repeat what I said yesterday. President Uhuru Kenyatta said, every day we are losing 2 billion. I saw in social media some people asking, does it mean we are stealing? Kenyans are stealing even over the weekend. Kenyans don't sleep. They even steal at night, I'm sure. Many meetings you see people holding in hotels is just to cut deals. Hakuna kitu ingine. To plan how to steal money. Very interesting. And you are the same ones who are complaining when you are being taxed. But now the problem is your greed exposes everybody, including the innocent. And you know the people who can steal are only those who matter. Ordinary people, ukijaribu kuiba utashikwa siku hiyo hiyo. Now, if it is true that we are stealing 2 billion per day, and I keep on asking, let us assume that, Salim, you will forgive me for this, that we cannot stop stealing. Let us make that very outrageous assumption, because I know we can. If we can't stop, and we decide to reduce, it's a conscious decision that I don't know whether we take a referendum and we say, or we go to church and confess and we say, Mungu utatusamee, lakini tuna reduce wizi wetu mpaka nusu. If I've been stealing 1,000, from now I make a commitment, New Year resolution, it is 500 shilling. You will reduce theft to 1 billion or by 1 billion. And you will save 365 billion in a year. Do we really need to go to IMF, World Bank, to wait for executive decision of Trump? We will not. But what if now we decide we want to be satisfied with what we have? We are stealing zero. All of us as a country, we are not stealing anything. And then we save this 2 billion per day. We will save over 700. In fact, our total deficit will be covered by our own taxes, and we will not borrow any money. That is a possibility. So that is what I want to leave you with. To think through it. We are putting up systems. Chris here is chairing a committee which is implementing e-procurement. We'll put that in place. We have a system in place. We are putting in place single account, treasury account, etc. They can be flashed. But these people are technology savvy. They will cut corners. So the most important thing is your personality. It's not the systems that we put in place. I've been discussing with the KRA staff, and you realize that we have systems, although we are talking of improving them, but even the systems that we have are still being abused. And it is very painful that you find people making claims which they should not make. You find people filing claims, creating businesses. You know, there is this input and output tax. With the help of some of our staff, some, not all. What they do, you create a company that does not exist. You just create John Buddy company. Does not exist, gives you an invoice that does not exist. That is input tax. Then you have an output tax. You have sold nothing. You go and claim money from KRA, and you are paid back. And you did not pay anything. Business people colluding with our staff. Yet there is a system, Chris. So systems will not solve these problems if we don't take conscious decisions as a country to move forward and remember that the money we are stealing belongs to us. We make that deliberate decision. My final example I will give you, I keep on giving this example. Those who have appeared in my events, probably now you are bored with it, but those who have not heard it, please let me tell you this story. I was in Singapore some time back. So I went to have my lunch in a restaurant. After eating, I realized I didn't have their local currency. I had US dollars. So they were not accepting US dollars. You have to exchange it. So I inquired whether there was a bureau around there for changing the money. And they told me, yes, there is one here. Now I want you to see the difference. There is one here, but here it is more expensive. So you can go, there's a place where you can get better rates. Imagine someone telling you, don't exchange with us here, you can go somewhere, about 300 meters away. I don't know whether that is easy in Kenya. I wanted to start from that point. I don't know whether that is easy here. I'm yet to face such environment in Kenya. Then, when I was shown where I was supposed to go and get my change, get the money exchanged, it's about 300 meters away, and also you go and get your change there. So I walked. As I was walking to that place, I'm looking back to see, have they given me someone to take me there? I was alone. I went, got my change, came back and paid. I don't know how many of you, if you are running your business, you would allow anyone to step out of the door with your bill, to go 300 meters away to get foreign currency exchanged and come and pay you. You would say, I will give you someone to take you. Not to show you where you are going, but to watch so that you can come back. That is how the environment, and there they have, it is not even ringing. It doesn't even come to their thoughts that you could run away. But here, the default setting is that you will not come back. So you must, even if you are a pastor, they will not allow you to go. Even if you are dressed in those robes, you are a pastor, they can see this is a religious person. You will not be allowed to walk with the money. That is how society shapes behavior. So I want us to just change our mindset. Sorry I've taken longer than I thought I would take, but I think this is a topic that elicits a lot of discussion and debate. And when we get into the discussions, please let us ask ourselves how going forward we can make our debt sustainable. The people who are in this room, you are the ones who have been tasked with this responsibility. Kenyans are looking up to us. There is nobody else, imagine. It's not even the president at State House. The president at State House is waiting for what Treasury is advising him should be done to manage our debt. We have it in our hands. Either we blow it up or we help the country move forward and we leave a legacy in whatever level, in whatever capacity, that when we were at the Treasury, we were the people who made the worst situation better for the people of Kenya and for posterity. And we are doing it not for ourselves, but for our children, grandchildren, and the future generations to come. Remember, even when you are gone, people will still talk about you if you did something positive. I still hear people talk about Tom Mboya, isn't it? There is something probably did in the Ministry of Economic Planning. People still talk about some Kenyans who did good things. Let them, may we work hard so that we are talked about positively, not negatively as people who brought the economy down. God bless you.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. I have picked 3 key messages. We have seen the overview of Kenya's debt landscape. We have been told that the problem in Kenya's debt is not the numbers. Yes, the number is a problem, but the biggest issue is the time frame. And importantly, the ultimate call to collective action and collective responsibility. And so as we move into the next stage, and before even we get to the next stage, Your Excellency, I would like to confirm, you've mentioned you have an amazing team. At IPF, we affirm you have an amazing team at Treasury. We have interacted with the different departments, directorates. You have an amazing team. As we move into the next stage, would like to welcome a representative from the Public Debt Management Office to take us through now into the meat of the management strategies that have been put in place. That which then, when we come together and say collective responsibility, this is the strategy that we will support in our individual institutions, in our respective spaces, in our individual capacities. We will support in the implementation to deliver the desired set targets for debt numbers and ultimately efficiency in PFM, ultimately service delivery. And so at this moment, I would like to welcome the representative from the Public Debt Management Office who will take us through the presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, CS, my peers, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I will just go through the details of what the CS has covered. He has made this presentation easier because he spoke everything. I'll just bring in the numbers and a bit of his policy positions and intentions as the CS intends to implement in the National Treasury. We're going to look at assist me, IT. Okay. We are going to look at briefly, I'll be very brief, in each of the following topics: debt management strategy, legal framework, underpinning debt management, the budget cycle, Kenya's public and publicly guaranteed debt, cost and risk characteristics of public debt, the Mtds itself, the potential sources of financing, the Kenya's DSA, and the objectives of the debt strategy. In terms of the debt management strategy, this is the plan the government intends to implement in order to achieve a desired public debt portfolio. The main objective of the DMS is to ensure that government financing needs and payment obligations are met at the lowest possible costs with a prudent degree of risks. The 2025 debt management strategy serves as a roadmap for the management of the country's public debt for the period 2025-26, 2026-27, and 2027-28, as required by the PFM Act. The strategy analysis takes into account outstanding public debt as of June 2024, given that this strategy was prepared in November 2024, and therefore the stock numbers that were available for that was the June 2024 position. However, we'll be able to update on the latest debt stock, as the CS mentioned. The strategy analysis also takes into account the projected borrowing and debt service obligations. Usually debt has two aspects. You have maturing debt, which you must, as we said, we have deficit budget, so we have to borrow to pay, and we have to borrow for each of the financial year's deficit. And that is what we are going to look at. The legal framework underpinning MTTS is Article 211 of the Constitution, which provides for borrowing by the national government, subject to the approval of Parliament. Section 331 of the PFM Act, which provides for the preparation of the MTDS for submission to Parliament latest by 15th February each year. The MTDS is derived from the priorities and the policy goals of the BPS, which is prepared taking into account the whole context of the economy, the available resources, to identify gaps that needs to be financed through borrowing. We also have Article 201 of the Constitution, which provides for openness and accountability, including public participation in financial matters. And for your information, upon preparation of the draft MTDS, the draft was subjected to countrywide public reviews in all the counties, conducted by various directorates of the National Treasury, led by the PDMO. A report of public participation was prepared and submitted to the Cabinet Secretary, and who submitted the same to the Parliament in accordance with the Constitution. The MTDS guides the government to borrow to fund budget deficit, as I said before, at affordable costs, prudent degrees of risks, as well as ensuring maturing debts are repaid on time. The budget cycle involves the preparation of the BPS, which identifies the resource envelope, what is available, and what needs to be funded. For the immediate coming year, as well as the medium term. This is followed by identification as to whether the budget has gaps to be funded, or it is balanced, or it has a surplus. Of course, the CS made it clear that we are not in the situation where we are able to achieve a balanced, neither a surplus budget. Therefore, the fiscal deficit arises when expenditure are greater than revenues, while surplus arise when revenues are greater than expenditures. A budget deficit is financed through borrowing, domestic and external, which of course leads to accumulation of public debt. In terms of the numbers, the CS gave you the number 10.582 as the stock of debt June 2024, which has risen now to 11 trillion point 01. Of course, the number he gave you is 0.02, which is even more latest than than the date of this presentation. Of course, in terms of US dollars, the number is there. In terms of what debt is to GDP, as at end of January 2025, this was 65.7%. In terms of cost and risk characteristics of public debt, if you look at the years 2025 2020, 2023, 24, 20, you are going to look at the external debt. You look at, just a moment. Let me just enlarge. We have external debt, domestic debt, and total debt. What is important there is the various risks and costs are enumerated there. We have the nominal debt as a percentage of GDP. Which, pardon me for this. The screen is small. The present value as a percentage of GDP. For the total debt, we have 68.2% in 2023, which has moved to 63% 2024. Then we have the various costs and the risks. Interest payment as a percentage of GDP, the total being 5.2%, that is interest as a percentage of GDP. In 2023, moving slightly above that figure to 5.4%. In terms of weighted average of the total debt interest rate, it is 7.3% for 2023, moving slightly up to 8.5% due to what the CS indicated to you, the volatilities and the increase in international capital markets, as well as what we witnessed in the domestic market, where interest rates moved up very, very significantly last year. It has just started to fade down in this first quarter of this calendar year. Then we have the refinancing risk, that is ability to turn over debt as it matures into new debt. The average time to maturity in years has improved. Has remained stable at 8.5 years, slightly coming down to 8.1 due to what much of the market did, lending to government in short term, mainly T-bills. Actually, consistent with that, the stock of treasury bills during these last 6 months has gone up compared to what it was there, and as witnessed, very little increase in the stock of treasury bonds. And that is what has reduced the average time to maturity. We have debt maturing in 1 year. This is mainly the treasury bills and hold stocks of into treasury bonds, which are maturing and coming within a 12-month maturity period. We have 13% last year, which has come down now to 11.2. Of course, due to some of the refinancing. Remember, we had near-term maturities of external debt in huge volumes, and this has since been refinanced into long-term, and this is what has reduced the stock of debt maturing within a year, but slightly. Then we have debt maturing in 1 year as a percentage of the economy, and this has reduced again from 9.2 to 7.5 due to the same reason I indicated. We have interest rate risks measured in average time to refixing. That is the total debt that is subject to renewal with uncertainties related to what the new interest rates will be as you renew that debt. In terms of the total debt, we are able to see that this has reduced, which is good because it is moving from 7.6%. It's moving from 7.6 to 7.5. Let me correct myself. The average time to refixing in years has come down from 7.6 years to 7.5, meaning we have debts which have flexible interest rates, maybe a base rate and a margin. The stock that is subject to refixing, in terms of the years, it has really stayed a little bit stable, but slight decrease, meaning that we need to work towards more fixed interest debt. Then debt refixing in years, percentage of total, it is moving from 25.9 to 24.6, which is again a slight decrease. We wish to see much of the debt to be in fixed interest rate. Then we have fixed rate debt, including treasury bills as a percentage of total. This is 55.7% in 2023, slightly coming down to 85.2 in 2024. Of course, this is an improvement, but as I said before, the stock of T-bills has really increased, and the moment we are able to solve and reduce that stock of treasury bills, that indicator will of course reverse. Then we have T-bills as a percentage of total debt. For the total debt, it is of course, T-bills is usually domestic, and as a percentage of total debt, it is 6.1%, which has come in 2023, which has come down to 5.1 in 2024. This percentage is not absolute. In terms of absolute numbers, of course, the stock has gone up. And then we have foreign exchange risks of debt, and we are 51.5% in 2023, which the CS indicated to you, we had a 1 trillion reduction in stock of external debt on account largely of appreciation of the Kenya shillings, given the interventions the National Treasury did to the debt portfolio. This has come down to 49.3%, an improvement. Really, an improvement, because many countries which are mature in their capital markets, they have 100% in terms of total debt in their own currency, which is a desired kind of long-term goal even for ourselves. Subject to the structure of debt, if we can have reduced external liabilities, we'll not need external funding, and therefore will not need to accumulate external debt. And we'll be moving towards 100% or 100% local currency or 0% foreign exchange denominated debt. Kenya's public debt issues, the CS highlighted, we have raising debt levels in terms of absolute numbers. even as we work towards reducing that number in terms of relative to the GDP. This leads to high debt service costs, as we'll see in the numbers that will follow. We have vulnerability of external shocks. He spoke about the Trump effect. We also have, for example, when we end the recent dislocation of interest rates in the national capital markets immediately following the COVID episode, and global economic uncertainties, the trade tariffs that are being exchanged between the major economies of the world is bringing uncertainties, which might spill over into global interest rates profile. We have the currency risks, which is, in our case, depreciation of the Kenya shillings, which would lead to increase in external debt stock and the overall debt stock, leading to more Kenya shillings being used to service external debt. We also have interest rates risk. The CS spoke about volatility of interest rates effects on cost of borrowing, both domestic and external. Domestic is highly interlinked with the external through the banking system. And mark-to-market principles. The poor rating, credit rating for Kenya, we witnessed in the last 1 year. Of course, we have a rating of CAA1 by Moody's. We have a B with B minus with stable outlook by Fish. We have B minus with stable outlook by S&P, which are all these grades. This rating for Kenya is not consumerate with an investment grade sovereign issuer, but a speculative investment, or what they call in global capital markets junk securities. Of course, we are working towards improving those optics through various interventions, including reduction in the fiscal deficits, among other interventions. I'm going to speak about the medium-term debt strategy 2025, which proposes to borrow 25% gross borrowing from external sources, 75% in gross borrowing from domestic. Gross means you borrow to finance the deficit as well as to repay maturing debts. In terms of the net, that is financing the fiscal deficit for 2025-26 financial year, the numbers are 35 external, 65 domestic. And this will be achieved through mobilization of resources from domestic market, mainly on account of issuing medium to long-term bonds. External borrowing through concessional loans to keep the cost of borrowing low, mainly from multilateral sources, bilateral sources, with a limited recourse to commercial debt. Of course, so to date, you have seen all commercial external borrowing is going to reprofile the external public debt. We have targeted to reduce foreign exchange risk by diversifying debt held in foreign currency so that there is no, we reduce the dominance of the major currencies across the board, and ensuring intergenerational equity in sharing cost and benefits of borrowing. This is done through ensuring that short-term borrowing is not used to fund capital projects, but ensuring that if it's a capital good, like a road and recent infrastructure projects, they are funded through long-term, because the benefits not only benefit the current generations, but also it will have remnants to benefit the future generations, and therefore the debt cost burden is shared between the current and the future generations. The optimal strategy offers the most favorable medium-term debt cost and risk, as we shall see. The risk and the cost we have gone through in the previous slide are earmarked to improve in the medium term, as we shall see, arising from implementation of this strategy. The potential sources of financing the deficits and also financing maturing debt include domestic debt, debt market through treasury bonds, Bills will be used for cash management in accordance with the law. External borrowing will be through concessional loans from unilateral, bilateral, commercial loans, such as international bond issuers, of course, for the purpose we highlighted. Then exploring emerging market funding instruments, such as debt swaps. I understand Citibank is conducting a session on this Friday, at least to ensure that as we go to debt swaps, we are well informed. The diaspora bond, which is highly being funded by the National Treasury in collaboration with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Diaspora Directorate. Sustainability-linked bonds, of course, supported by the World Bank. And then the ESG debt instrument to fund budget deficit and manage public debt with due regard to environmental, social, economic principles. In terms of Kenya's DSA, as the CS said, our debt remains sustainable, of course, with elevated probability of debt distress. The external DSA demonstrates that the present value of external debt to GDP ratio is within the sustainability threshold of 40%. I give you the numbers. The present value of external debt to exports has breached the sustainability threshold of 180%. I give you the numbers shortly. The debt service to revenue ratio has breached the 18% sustainability threshold. And this is going to remain this way up to the year 2028 in terms of our projection, due to anticipated commercial maturities. Of course, we are doing actively reprofiling of external debts through managing the structure of the maturities, particularly the external ones. The debt service to exports remains in a breach of the 15% sustainability threshold all the way to 2029. Up to that point, these three bullets, they are speaking to exports. That is to say, Kenya's export performance is not up to date to support accumulated external liabilities. We either reduce the external liabilities slowly over time, because it cannot be done at once, or we rejuvenate our export sector for us to stop reaching these external debt sustainability indicators. External domestic obligation covering the central government debt, central bank debt taken on behalf of the government from IMF, of course, and the Social Security Fund and government guarantees debt are all covered in this DSA analysis. The last DSA analysis was conducted in October. We're in the process of conducting another DSA before June this year. These are the numbers. The first column after the narratives are the sustainability indicators. In the first row, where we have 40, you can see the overall present value of external debt to GDP is within sustainable levels of 40%. If you look at the second line, which is present value of external debt to exports, the sustainability indicator is 180. Much of all those items, they are up to 2034. They are all in breach of that indicator. In terms of external debt service to exports, our ability of our exports to generate enough money to meet our external obligations as they fall due, we do not have that inflows. 15% is the sustainable indicator. We are above that indicator all through up to 2044. In terms of ability to service external debt, in relationship to our local revenue, the indicator is 18. And as you can see, from 2023, all the way to 2029 or maybe 2028, we are in breach of 18%. And therefore, as you have seen, and we are going to see the overall debt, we are not doing well in terms of the accumulated external debt obligations, in terms of stock, in terms of flows per year. And this is an area which the CS spoke about. We are doing a lot of liability management, targeting the external debt stock in order to reprofile, push away those maturities as we grow the economy towards the point when then what will happen, we'll have a small ratio of external debt obligation compared to the size of the GDP. In terms of the total debt, present value of total public debt to GDP is projected to remain slightly above 55% benchmark through 2029, after which it is projected to decline. As a national treasury, we have up to 2028 November 1st to comply with the 55%. But in terms of sustainability, we'll be able to get there in 2029. The plans for improving the sustainability of public debt include fiscal consolidation. The CS and the PS gave very good analogy of how fiscal deficits have come down and are projected to come down. Fiscal deficits are the source of public debt. And the more you reduce the fiscal deficit, the more you come down to ability to live within means without distress. We need to diversify export base and build gross international reserves to improve the external debt sustainability and overall debt sustainability. We need to continue optimizing on the use of affordable concessional funding, lengthen the maturity profile of public debt through issuance of long-term securities, but we need also to develop our domestic debt market so that as developed markets do, we continue to rely more on domestic. We are doing well. As you saw, the stock of external debt is smaller than the stock of domestic debt. If we can expand on that milestone, the better. We need to be proactive in public debt management through exploring possibilities of reprofiling our debt maturities so that we reduce immediate financial burden and allow room for meeting public service delivery. In addition, a steady and a strong inflow of remittances and a favorable outlook of export will play a major role in supporting external debt sustainability. Of course, in terms of inflows of remittances, we are also going to catalyze that through the issuance of a diaspora bond. In terms of total public debt sustainability, we only have one common indicator, the first line, which is the present value of debt to GDP, and 55 is the level of sustainability for a country like Kenya, but it also happens to be our legal limit. So currently, all the way from 2022 to 2029, we are in breach. We look forward to achieving that ratio after 2029. We do actively evaluate the present value of debt to revenue here in Kenya, but it's not a conventional measure of sustainability. But what is more important is at the bottom. How is debt service compared to revenue and grants? To use a basic language, we'll say all through we are using more than half of our revenue to service debt. Of course, after 2028, we are likely to use less than half of our revenues to service debt. When you use much of your revenue to service debt, then it means you have less resources to deliver public service. But that is also not to say we are using this half of our revenue to service debt. Actually, we are borrowing to service debt. The objectives of the 2025 optimal debt management strategy. Optimal, why? Because we've realized we have less costs and risks with a 25% gross borrowing from external sources and 75% gross borrowing from domestic sources. The objectives of this optimal DMS is reducing financing risks, of course, by reducing short-term debt. I'll be brief here. Reducing the interest rate risk by increasing the average time to refixing through reducing the amount of debt with the variable interest rates. Of course, targeting more of fixed interest rate loans. Reducing foreign exchange risk by diversifying external debt portfolio currencies. And then promoting intergenerational equity, as I said. Further objectives include ensuring government's financing needs are met at lowest possible cost, maintaining debt at sustainable levels, mitigating risk associated with debt, including interest rates, currency risk, and refinancing risk, supporting macroeconomic stability and economic growth as defined in the BPS, enhancing transparency and accountability in debt management, and this includes sessions like this, regular publications, and public participation. The expected, as I said, once this strategy is implemented, the expected structure of costs and risks in 2028, the last year of this strategy, of course, it will be reviewed annually, is that we expect the nominal debt as a percentage of GDP to be 57.8. That is lower from 63 at the current rate, and then present value of debt as a percentage of GDP declining from the current rate to 52.8%. Interest rate as a percentage will come down. So let me assume you are able to see the last column, and we have seen much of those indicators are going to be much better than the current levels. I want to stop there. Possibly the MC will be able to guide on procedure for questions, and but we'll be glad to answer questions led by our CS, so that from this dissemination session, we are able to get your reactions. Last year when we had this session, we got the feedback that it was very welcome, and we would like to see it go out of Nairobi, possibly to the counties. Of course, when we went to the counties, we were seeking their views, but going back there to show them the final product, of course, it requires resources. With austerity measures currently being implemented in the Treasury, this might require continued partnership between ourselves and the IPF. We hope you took note that time, and we hope to hear your decision going forward. Let me stop there. Possibly the MC could preside.
Wow, that was a packed presentation. We have seen in detail the landscape of where we are in terms of public debt, debt sustainability analysis, the risk measures, the possible mitigation, and ultimately, towards the tail end of the presentation, we have heard of the strategies that are being implemented. Now, our speaker has invited questions, but before we get into the questions, would like to take a few minutes, because we've also invited experts and participants, representations from different institutions, for a very brief panel discussion so that we pick insights, and then we can present questions then that will leverage on both the presentation as well as insights from the panelists. For this session, I will welcome Sheila Masinde from Transparency International Kenya to lead us. Let us applaud her as she comes.
Good morning, everyone. Hey, good morning. You've had good tea, haven't you? And the CS has assured us that mfuko ya Kenya iko sawa, that we're going to pay our debts if we only steal half of what we are currently stealing. But Bwana CS, in due respect, we just need to stop stealing. This stealing is not sustainable. It isn't. Even if we say half of it, In any case, those who are still stealing half, hata nikisema, if we say that we're going to reduce stealing by half, those people will still be assaulting and breaching our laws because it is illegal. And I think we should just find a way in which we kill this culture of theft, of greed, and just live with what we have. Because that is a problem that we need to address, the greed. And I really hope, I hope we can continue to engage on this, CS. But I know you keep on telling us, as civil society, as Kenyans, we need to be pragmatic, and maybe that's part of the pragmatism. If people are stealing 2 billion, can they reduce to 1 billion? Maybe it will get to 0 at some point. But I think we just need to go cold turkey and say, just stop the stealing. But I think we can continue to engage in this panel. I know we keep arguing. You say that we are too pragmatic and idealist and we are living in utopia, but I still believe that they are good Kenyans, and those good Kenyans are the ones who should be in public office to safeguard the little resources that we have. But ladies and gentlemen, we want to really move quickly into the panel. We don't have much time because I know that people have very busy mornings. So the brief I have is that we want to have a discussion, but it needs to be done fairly quickly. And so my panelists will have to, I hope amtakasirishwa if I move you a little fast, because we want to also get the questions from the plenary and still engage with the CS and PS while they're still here. We have received an overview of the 2025 Media and Debt Strategy, the Kenya, okay. It's so hard to multitask. You need to move this, yeah? So we have received an overview of the medium debt strategy, the challenges that we still face and which present a challenge in our debt management. We've also received the plans ahead from Treasury in terms of how we continue to improve public debt sustainability and just some of the key strategies that they have in terms of managing debt. And we want to dig into a small panel discussion, then we can quickly go to the plenary because I can see there are a number of questions and comments. And for this, I want to quickly invite the panelists that we have on board. I'll start with Professor Michael Shege. Is Prof there or he's walked out? He's coming back. Okay, then I will call Daniel Ndolo. Daniel, please come back. The director, I think you're representing the Public Debt Management Office. Please come back to the stage. We also have Martin Mugambi. He's a CEO of and MD of Citibank. Martin, please come. And we have Veronica Ndegwa, a senior researcher from the Institute of Public Finance. Veronica, where are you? Are you here? Thank you very much. Okay, so. Okay, Daniel is coming back. I'll start with those on I'll start with Martin. You are the first one to sit, so you take the hard questions first. Okay, I'll start with Martin. I wanted to start with Daniel, but we can start with you since you're here. And we want to, maybe if you can address a little bit about the private sector credit and domestic borrowing, and also just delve in a little bit into alternative financing and market-based instruments, at least from a private sector perspective. And specifically from a lender's perspective, how does domestic borrowing under the medium-term debt strategy affect liquidity and credit availability for private enterprises? and is lending to the government, crowding out the private sector. I think that's a concern I've had from many forums when you talk about debt and the role of the private sector. You know, what is the impact of this?
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me, Sheila?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. And first of all, I want to commend the CS and the PS for your remarks and the National Treasury for hosting this very important session on the medium-term debt strategy. I think it's also important that we appreciate some of the strengths of our markets, because you know, sometimes we are so caught up in looking at the problems that we're going through, but we don't actually appreciate that we've got a fairly strong domestic capital markets today. Today we have outstanding domestic debt of about 5.9 trillion, which the CS pointed out and the NT pointed out. But if you look at the strength, the tenor, the resilience of our markets, we've got market that goes out to 25 years. Yeah, we've got very diverse players in terms of commercial banks, asset managers, pension funds, insurance companies, and also offshore investors that participate in our markets. So number one, we've got deep markets, long tenor, and very wide participation. Two, I think this concept of crowding out needs to be unpacked. What do we mean by crowding out? Yes, the sovereign is a regular domestic issuer, and that is a good thing. I think the ability of the domestic market to finance the needs of the sovereign is a net positive. And I'm very encouraged to see the 75-25 split for domestic versus external borrowing in the medium term. That is the right strategy. It reduces FX risks, it deepens the capital markets, and it also allows participation. Number two, we also have innovation. We have, through this Dow CSD, the participation of retail investors in the domestic capital markets through the use of technology. Not many countries have that, yeah? And that is also a very big positive that draws in liquidity. So crowding out is really a concept where the sovereign has borrowed substantive amounts of debt in the public market, and private companies and SMEs and the likes are not able to access financing. I think that should be taken into context, because today liquidity has always been available in the domestic market. It is really a function of the pricing, number one. Number two, the structure of that liquidity. So is it short term, is it long term? And three, the appetite of investors. So I think, Sheila, the way to answer that question is to say that when the sovereign has a very clear plan, communicates that plan to the market, there's the domestic borrowing plan that's communicated actually to the market, and there's a fiscal plan, a fiscal roadmap that investors understand, then participants in the capital markets are able to support the sovereign's borrowing needs, and that's the exercise that we're doing here. Two, crowding out can also be a function of domestic interest rates. What we have seen is that domestic interest rates have reduced by almost 500 basis points in the last, I would call it 18 months, right? So credit is actually more available. So I would close the question by saying crowding out is a concern, but practically the markets in Kenya are quite deep and are able to handle not only public borrowing, but also participation by private investors and retail investors.
Thank you, Martin. If we have time, I think I'll also want to come back just to query what potential do instruments such as green bonds, diaspora bonds, and blended finance and PPPs also offer in Kenya's debt profile if we manage to come back. I hope we do. But I want to get back to just think through that. I want to get to the other panelists. Martin, you are the one presenting the MTTS to us a few minutes ago. And I think Daniel, sorry, Daniel Ndolo. And I think the question to you in particularly regard to balancing development and debt sustainability as a follow-up to your presentation would be, how does the MDTS strike a balance between Kenya's growing development financing needs and the imperative for debt sustainability? What does that mean for us?
Maybe before we get to the MTDS dynamics, we need to look at ourselves as a country. We did accumulate public debt in the recent years, maybe in the last 10 years, much of it since 2014. I think in 2014, our debt ceiling, our external debt was 1.4 trillion. 1.8 trillion, thank you, CS. But what has led to that accumulation? If you look at the accumulation of external debt, or even debt in general, vis-a-vis what you can see on the ground, we have accumulation of liabilities in terms of debt, but we have assets to testify use of those proceeds. And the beauty is some of those assets, which I'll mention, they are not going to be redone again, possibly in the next 50 to 100 years. We have, out of these 5 trillion external debt, we have half of that, 500 billion going to the SGR. This SGR is not going to be replicated for the next more than 100 years. But that debt which came about from that will be wiped out. If you look at the major roads, I don't want to mention, they are numerous. They won't be redone in the next possibly 40 to 50 years. But by that time, that debt will not be in our books. And therefore, we have very huge prospects of those particular assets generating more income for this country, even as we repay those debts. And therefore, what you get out of that will be net benefits, not net cost. When it comes to the MTDs, therefore, we are aligning that the strategy is to minimize costs of any new borrowing and risks of new borrowing and the existing stock. And we have enumerated the strategies for that. And the BPS itself, which has the whole economic perspective of where money is going and how much is going to be borrowed vis-a-vis the available resources, you find that, and as the CS Lily and the PS gave you a trend in slowdown in accumulation of public debt through fiscal deficits, we are going to see, while we are not going to do new SGR, redo the roads we have done, we are going to penetrate into new economic fronts as emulated in the BPS. And if you look at all that, we don't have a mega project to finance. Possibly we'll do some airport, maybe through PPP or otherwise. And the PPP front is really coming in hard in terms of with a revised legal framework. And in terms of therefore borrowing the debt accumulation and financing for development, we have a better landscape ahead of us. Fewer huge demands. Maybe they may be multiple, but they are not require huge sums. The projects that are going to require huge sums are actually like going to be financed through PPP, like the dualling of the Rironi to Nakuru expressway, then Nairobi to Mombasa expressway. So government will still continue to do far much better in provision of public services, but with far less impact in terms of resorting to taxes, to repay debts, debt accumulation consistently. You can see we are going targeting to the lower tens, the 3 point something. Eventually, I think the PS has been very clear and advocating for more balanced budget. I want to stop there.
Thank you very much, Daniel. And we've heard from private sector, we've heard from government through Daniel's presentation. I want to switch gears a little and maybe come to Veronica before I come to Prof. And maybe just to give us some perspectives, particularly looking at, public concern, civic engagement, and so on. But Veronica, the first question is, to what extent do you consider that the assumptions that have been embedded in the debt strategy are ideal for Kenya's current fiscal situation and context? And also, what improvements would you perhaps propose to ensure the strategy remains realistic and responsive, just also thinking about the public concerns and the demands that the public have put in regard to debt management?
Thanks, Sheila. And I think I'll begin by appreciating the leadership of the National Treasury and IPF for this platform. And coming to the question, the presentation that was made, the MTDS has one core goal: balance risks and cost of debt. But oftentimes it's always a trade-off between costs and risks. And that is what governs or guides determination of what borrowing mix the government is going to adopt. And for those of us who had time to look at the MTDS, there's a list of assumptions that guide the debt mix, the determination of the optimal debt mix, and there's also mapping out of risks, which are tied to the assumptions that PDMO makes in doing the debt strategy. Some of these are projections around revenue, around expenditures, around growth, around inflation, and for external debt, around exchange rate movements. And in terms of the risks, as I mentioned, they are tied now to these assumptions. So one would be if growth was lower than projected, if revenues were lower than projected, and maybe the in-year adjustments that come to expenditures that then tend to create additional borrowing pressures on the side of the government. I would give a specific example of last year. GDP was projected at around above 5%, but the numbers show the actual outturn will be around 4.6%. And of course, we'll see a review of this in the annual debt management report. But one proposal maybe I would make here is more frequent revisions in terms of the assumptions we are making and making adjustments to our debt numbers. The context being we do revisions to our revenue numbers, in-year adjustments to our revenue numbers. We also do in-year adjustments to our expenditure numbers, but we do not see so much of these adjustments to the debt strategy in year. Probably it happens internally within the National Treasury, but then for us outside government would want to see also these assessments so that even in our review of government policies, we can have sort of reference to what the government thinking is about. The other thing I would mention is about exchange rate. We did a brief, not a very detailed analysis of the exchange rate movement vis-a-vis debt, the debt numbers. And though there are some cases of response by the government in terms of how the exchange rate is moving, in some cases, the borrowing decisions were not influenced by the exchange rate movements. So here the proposal I'd make, we have the monthly debt bulletins that has a section of exchange rate movement and how the exchange rate has moved. And knowing that most of our debt is in USD, we'd probably want to see now linking those exchange rate movements to the kind of borrowing decisions the government is making. And then the other probably recommendation would be, we have also a report, a section on public debt in the QBR, the Quarterly Economic and Budgetary Review. It's usually mostly reporting on the debt outcome, so just the level of borrowing. So probably that document can also serve as a review, can also have a review of the risks that we assumed at the beginning of the year and how they have materialized in the course of the year. And there, and yeah.
Thank you very much, Veronica. I want to get to Professor Michael Shege, who's currently teaching public policy and international development at the University of Nairobi, and he served previously as the UNDP policy advisor at the Ministry of Planning and the National Economic and Social Council, if I'm not wrong. And Prof, I think the question for you here would be particularly looking at the, just still digging a little bit more into what other, like particularly non-state actors, like speaking for myself, as a civil society practitioner, and also for those of us who have really been following and working with both Treasury and other actors, IMF and others, and also engaging on the issues around debt. We, as civil society, have largely been engaged, more or less downstream in regard to the Kenya's debt discourse. But what flows or mismatches are limiting our upstream involvement in debt strategy formulation, and how might this be structurally reversed to enable more proactive rather than reactive civic engagement?
Thanks very much. I think I very much share your position about inadequate participation in the discussion on policy making, particularly on external debt, which you are discussing this morning, both at the level of civil society, but also, I must say, even from where I'm positioned presently, academia. It used to be the case that universities and scholars and research institutes in the public sector would be intimately involved in research on public finance, as well as other public issues, but also in training of economists, of policymakers, of staff that would be dealing with this kind of issue. I see a certain decline in quality of policy debate in our country. And not just here, the rest of the world, the dumbing down of discussion, mainly because we are so obsessed, like the rest of the world, in social media, where instant solutions are made and they spread like wildfire. Civil society has not yet gotten aware of how much audience cost to so-called social media in comparison to the old ways of meetings and direct engagement of the public. I want to start by saying very briefly, Madam Chair, that I would like I join everybody who said this morning that we should be grateful to our Treasury staff having this document. Is a very good piece of work. Work with now. I want to make a few points, if you allow me. Firstly, the context. This document could do a lot better if you explain that the context in which debt and debt policy is being reconsidered is one in which we are seeking to have macroeconomic stabilization in our country as a prelude to more rapid growth. More rapid growth, or the right quality, would be an answer to a lot of the issues that you're seeing here. If GDP growth was faster than rate of borrowing, that will reduce your debt to GDP ratio. Now, until we have stabilized our macro factors, and I think our CS was kind enough to remind us that inflation is within the right limits. It's the problem with the debt, external debt, that we have to deal with and give good attention to. This is a problem we as Kenya face, and not just Kenya, a lot of developing countries in our position. The IMF African Economic Outlook for this year highlights this, that we don't have a solution to debt problems in countries like Kenya. This issue, the current issue of finance and development from the IMF, again, there's an article by Anne Kruger, which, this is an old timer in these matters. And she's saying that we don't have a solution that would help developing countries in our position to manage the debt crisis that they're facing. Kenya is trying to do a very difficult exercise here, avoiding debt restructuring. I don't know why, but I think we should be discussing this. I do not know a business that would be facing a balance sheet like we are doing now, looking at the solvency side, looking at the liquidity side, and not recommend a restructuring of debt if you have a plan of recovery that will reintroduce growth, and growth that will be enhancing and making it easier for you to deal with the issues you're facing. Trust me, I'm old enough to have looked very closely at what happened to Sri Lanka in the past, and what happened there in 2020 coming to 2022. Ghana, over the years, and where they are, Zambia 220, Ethiopia. I think unless we look at what is happening to other countries, we might be missing an awful lot of solutions, an awful lot of proposals that we should be looking at. I think from point of view of the academy, it is not a problem for us. It is not a problem for us to look at what is happening to the rest of the world, to other developing countries with debt problems like ours, and how they have dealt with. And restructuring is one instrument that they come to. I know Kenya wants to have a reputation as a country that does not have debt restructuring and that does not go for debt forgiveness. In 2022, I watched with utter disbelief Kenya refusing to take advantage of debt repayment moratorium as a result of COVID. Imagine that. You could have kicked the can, something like $900 million that we should have paid that year, that we could have been forgiven, and we just walked away. This kind of arrogance hits Kenyans badly, and it's time that we looked at what other countries are doing and see what we can learn from that. The second point, Madam Chair, is fiscal consolidation. I looked at an IMF study, I think it's about 18 months ago, on Kenya, and they were looking at what we do with taxation in Kenya. Too many changes of rates and of base, almost bewildering. And they were saying this is part of the reason why there is instability in revenue. And I'm not denying that corruption is important, but policy changes are just as important as the manner in which we implement. I dare say that if you look, and you're talking about fiscal consolidation here, if you look at the expenditure side, the situation is getting worse. What we present as the budget to Parliament in the beginning of the financial year has very little resemblance with what comes out in the figures at the end of the financial year. Supplementary budgets are a greater percentage of total expenditure every year than they ever were. Nobody takes the budget seriously because it can be toyed with, you can be removed, items are included that weren't there, and there are far too many players in this game. We are not saying that, given the way the Constitution is, that has to change, but a certain amount of discipline has to be brought in. I want to say something about, yes, I'm concluding actually. The risks and the ones of risk assessment in the external market has come up. But I'm talking about systemic institutional risks. We have a government in Washington, D.C., whose attitude towards the Bretton Woods institution is still not clear. Heaven knows what they will say. Yesterday morning, what they said about Europeans and European security was a shocker. It was a statement among the top people in that government that was leaked by the Atlantic Monthly, the periodical, because it was sent to them by accident. And what they were really saying is, fiercely, we are not going to be spending money on people who could be doing a lot for themselves. It's a very much MAGA attitudes towards the international system that we inherited from 1945. That worries me. Finally, I want to go back to the question of growth. I was looking at the question, the performance of Ivory Coast, which used to be a country we were compared to in the early years of our independence. We've fallen back because questions like foreign direct investment, which are not featured in this report, are no longer taken seriously in this country. If you look at the news yesterday, Ethiopia with ADB are launching a project of airport hub, 40 miles south of Addis Ababa, for $8 billion. $5 billion international airport in Kigali. Money in big terms is going to our neighbors. It used to be the opposite. This place is asleep. What is going on? And can we continue like this? No. Whatever you think of the Gen Zs, they were pointing to some systemic failures in our country that are appearing here. Please don't treat this document as purely technical one. Its linkage to the other macro issues, to the political economy, to a geographic area of location, to our past and our future is not there. I think you brought the facts as they are now. I hope we can do better. And I hope people like us who are in teaching and in research can make a better contribution than we've done in the past. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Prof. Some very provoking reflections you have. I hope that Daniel or maybe your colleagues from Treasury have taken note of some of the points from the panelists, and perhaps in your concluding remarks, I'll give you a chance. I want us to go to the plenary because of just time sensitivity, and also to be able to get some of our key guests to answer some questions before they have to leave. And I know one of the panelists also has to leave, so I'm a bit under pressure to try to expedite some of these discussions. So maybe we start with taking 3 questions from the plenary. 3 questions. If you can just have one thought or one question, that would be great, so that we can have enough time for other people to be able to express any questions or remarks or comments or feedback. There are no questions. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay, I can see Cuba there with a question. That corner, where? Oh, sorry, my back is facing you. There's a question here. Where's the mic? We can start here with this table. Anyone in the middle, or if not, we'll jump right there to that corner where Cuba is, and there's a gentleman there. So we'll take those 3 first.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the presentation. My name is Julius Moya, and I really agree about the National Treasury led by my friends in the National Treasury. I have very many questions, but I'll ask only one.
Please,
because
just
you have
one.
allowed us to ask only one.
Just one, thank you.
And it's actually reflecting on the question about the balanced budget or no balanced budget. I know the CS did mention that it is difficult to have a balanced budget. But I also am aware that PS also had indicated that let's try to move towards a balanced budget. Because the truth of the matter is, as Daniel Ndolo and team are doing this medium-term strategy, that is a byproduct of the problem of the fiscal framework of the budget deficit. So if we can start by looking at the problem in the eye and asking ourselves, how can we reduce government expenditure at the budgeting stage? Both the recurrent expenditure, the capital expenditure, and within the Yeah, so let me just wind up my question. So if we can reduce our budgeted expenditure and keep it within what we can finance, and mainly through taxation, such that whatever we go out to borrow, the budget deficit is as small as possible, that would solve a lot of our problems. I have ideas of how to do that, but because of time limitation, I'll just leave that as a question where we can look at the problem in the eye and say the problem is budgeted expenditure, where government has expanded to provide too many services which it is not good in providing those services. Thank you.
All right, good morning. My name is Cuba Houghton. I'm representing Budgeti Hub, and we are one of the organizations that has been looking at the medium-term debt strategy for many years, since around 2014. And one of the things we note is that there's often been a deviation between the borrowing strategy and the actual borrowing outcome, even between the medium-term debt strategy and the budget estimates, right? So actually this is evident even in the medium-term debt strategy of 2025, where there's a table 5, which shows that for the last 5 years there's been a deviation. So my question is, does the National Treasury think that there's more, or the PDMO to be specific, think that there's more flexible, a more flexible way that we can go about this debt management strategy process, so that when there are changes, these changes are actually brought to Parliament, they're brought to the, subject to the opinion of independent institutions like the Controller of Budget, to allow for a more inclusive process and more responsive process for debt management strategy. So it's not that in February every year we decide what we are going to borrow, and by December it's very different throughout the years. That's the submission.
So good morning. My name is Danson Ulodi from Economy Society of Kenya. I have only 2 issues. One is to...
Please keep it to one, prioritize, and give us the one most important.
Yeah, so I want to appreciate the work that the National Treasury is doing in organizing for such forums. And I want to say that in terms of using conventional tools to manage the economy, I think the National Treasury has done what is possible within their means. The only thing maybe that the focus should turn to is what I term as cultural and moral reincarnation, because now this is what the CS was talking about, of trying to reduce the debt by 50%. So that can only take a cultural and moral reincarnation to reduce debt by that 50%. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I'll come back to the panel. Daniel, most of the comments, questions are go directly to the door of Treasury. Maybe you can answer that. I don't know, they want to invite the PS to also answer some.
Maybe I can start off, and if the PS wants to add, is at liberty. The first issue raised by my fellow panelists was the issue of responsiveness to changes in the microeconomic environment, and the need to also change the strategy. Last year, we had major break from the initial policy position, macroeconomic policy position in terms of budget policy strategy, of course, leading to the rejection of the finance bill 2024. And the budget was therefore restructured. By August, September, the National Treasury led the process of revising the medium-term debt strategy, and a revised version was subjected to reviews, eventually taken to Parliament, and it was approved. It is uploaded in our National Treasury website. So we were responsive to that major event and major restructuring of the budget. So we were responsive to changes in risks, revenues, projections in accord. We can do more. Maybe whenever we have fewer changes, we can still consider the viability of a revised MTDs. In terms of upstream or downstream engagement with the civil society, as I said, we subjected the current 2025 MTDs to countrywide public participation. Possibly we did not have a targeted kind of engagement with specific segment of the society, but we take note that possibly the civil society could be engaged maybe more specifically in future editions of the strategy. In terms of, you know, the voice of Michael is very, 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 very important, because it calls us to inspect ourselves, evaluate ourselves on how we are doing and solving our problems vis-a-vis what the global trend is. I spoke about the 2020 DSI. When COVID came, many countries were faced with reduced public revenues, inability to meet budget requirements, and an initiative called Debt Service Suspension Initiative was conceived by the Paris Club in fighting member countries to consider negotiate suspension of debt service. So we had a 1-year suspension, and I think between 54 and 60 billion debt service obligations were deferred by a year, and that was eventually spread across the remaining years of those debt maturities. I don't talk about succession changes frequently. It was spot on. You know, governments operates within an economic systems and international context where there's a lot of changes taking place day and night. And somehow, policy must be responsive to the environment, but there should be predictability in terms of tax regime. I support him on that, even as we balance emerging situations to configure it with our national budgets. But the issue of US effects on the Bretton Woods institution, we must understand US is an investor through the IMF, the World Bank. They get returns. We are borrowers on the other side of those resources. And borrowing is not so interesting because you have to service at a cost. So even as we work towards reducing our fiscal deficits, we must understand that borrowing is not always the best option. It's just a way of balancing our immediate needs to create the economic capacities that will generate more income and wean ourselves one day possibly from the requirements, from the needs to borrow. But we do not have as many problems in this country like those countries. Those countries face more difficult problems, but they try to solve them. We are solving our problems. We, at the National Treasury, we are coming up with strategies. We don't look at ourselves as beneficiaries of IMF and World Bank. We actually look at ourselves as possible culprits, victims. If we were to accept all the lending proposals that comes to the doors of Treasury, we would be somewhere else further down. Our work in Treasury is to, much of it at the PDMO is to say no to all the things, except a few, which come from the lenders, including Martin and company. He can attest to that. And we say more no's to lending proposals from financial institutions than the yeses we do, because we have a strategy and we have need to reduce our fiscal deficits. So maybe as I wind up, he spoke very highly of what our capital is flowing to Ethiopia, to Rwanda. Kenya is one of the most diversified economy in Africa. And that is why it has always been resilient to external turbulences. These countries we are talking about, Rwanda is a small land-locked economy. It has to look for niches. Aviation is their target, and IT. As we are more spread across many sectors. So when they spend 5 billion on an airport, we will be spending 600 billion in other capital projects spread across the sectors. Same case with Ethiopia. Of course, we need to look at the GDP per capita to see how we are doing. But if you are ahead, you should work hard to stay ahead. Otherwise, somebody will bypass you. So the introspection challenge he has brought is very important to keep reevaluating ourselves, whether we are doing well or we are likely to fall back from our successes. So it's our problems, we must come up with their solutions. As I said before, we need to develop our domestic market to rely more on ourselves and all that. Possibly as a challenge to partners like Institute of Public Finance. If you listen to the questions coming from these experts in the audience, it points to the need for not only dissemination forums like this, but possibly a 1-2 day or a whole week of economic conference, calling many players to come and submit their memorandas, openly for actually to enrich the dialogue, the debate he spoke about, and improve the quality of our policies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Daniel, for that further elaboration. I think I'll come back to, I want us to wind up, and I'll go to each panelist. Just a minute, please, just a minute. As you can see, our audience is diminishing, so we don't want to lose the whole room, but if you can just take a minute and give us your final reflections on these discussions. Martin had asked you a question earlier in regard to alternative financing and market-based instruments. Maybe you can touch on that as you wind up, and then we come to Prof, and then we come to Veronica. I think Daniel has spoken a lot. We let him take water and take those as your final remarks.
Thank you, Sheila. In closing, I'll say this. Kenya is a very sophisticated borrower from the eyes of the international market. We've been in the market since 2014. We have a lot of optionality. What we need is fiscal credibility in terms of our roadmap. The instruments don't really matter. Those are all available to Kenya. I will make 2 points. One, a debt restructuring or a debt default should be the very last option. In the height of the crisis in 2024, when we had a potential default scenario in June of 2024, Kenya was still able to access the international market and liability manage those instruments that were maturing. This year again, Kenya accessed the market. So the international market is deep, is able to support Kenya, and we should not think that a restructure or a default is necessarily the first call or the first port of options in terms of managing our debt. There are many other options before we get to that stage, and I would like to encourage that thinking across the sovereign. Thank you.
Prof, 1 minute, please.
If you look at the chokehold of how much out of export is going to debt servicing, and you're not willing to say we should be doing more to bring in foreign investment, particularly foreign investment of the kind that is likely to boost exports, including exports in services. Tourism is an export in services. That will, I think we're making a big mistake, and we should be looking at that, because I see our neighbors doing better than we do, and our competitors in Africa doing better than we are doing. I agree with the sophistication of Kenya. I'm not particularly happy to compare Kenya with our neighbors. I think we should be looking at where we would have been had we contained or continued with accelerated growth of the kind that we saw in this country in 2003 to 2008, 2009, and that we want to see resume. Finally, I don't think that anybody who takes seriously issues of macroeconomic management would doubt that sometimes it is necessary to go into debt. Sometimes it's necessary for government to have a deficit, particularly if you're facing a slump. Sometimes it's necessary to move towards consolidation of the kind we're doing because the macro issues were completely out of sync. So it depends on how the situation is. And that's why I said in the beginning, let's look at the context more seriously in this paper than we are at the moment. Yeah.
Thank you. I hope I'll take 1 minute. I think I didn't have a specific question, but I would want to echo what PS Muya said, that we can actually work progressively towards a balanced budget. And probably a starting point could be linking the fiscal framework to the debt sustainability analysis we usually do. Most of the time, the DSA will propose a lower fiscal deficit than what we have in the BPS, and probably that would be a starting point. Me speaking as a person outside government and who relies on government publication or publicizing its own publications, I would think we can work on improving timely publications. For now, for example, we are done with the Mtds process. The annual borrowing plan, we are waiting for it, and we hope we'll be able to see it on time so that we can also give our input on that. Then, as our good colleague from PDMO has said, I think such stakeholder engagements are very good, and this is a very small group, and we hope to be able to collaborate more with PDMO and be able to hold so that we can have an opportunity to hold such discussions. I would hope Ruth will speak about a planned conference on macroeconomic, macro and debt conference. I hope she'll mention it. It's in the planning stage, and we hope to continue with this discussion going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have another forum where we can dive deep, because for sure this one, less than 1 hour session was not sufficient, but I still thank the panelists because they've really taken us deep, if you agree with me, given us much more information, helped us to draw out the context as well, and even just try to help us reach some solutions in terms of our public debt management. So thank you very much, Professor Michael Shege, Martin Mugambi, Daniel Ndolo, Veronica Ndegwa. Thank you very much. Makofi kwao tafadhali. Thank you.
And as they exit, we should give a round of applause to Ms. Sheila Masinde, who has done a good job at moderating the panel for us. Asante sana. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, we have had an amazing session today. I think we have learned a lot. I believe we have learned a lot. As Veronica has mentioned, we are at the nascent stages of planning, working collaboratively with the Public Debt Management Office and the National Treasury at large to convene a broader, wider forum with more stakeholders to be able to delve into these issues more in depth, so that we will speak more than an hour, more than a day, probably more than 2 days, to just get into the details of the issues that we have started off today. And so be on the lookout. As soon as those plans are ready, we look forward to hosting all of us again and deepening the conversation. At this point, I would like to welcome, I know we have put PDMO on the spot, But this is a treasury event, and we are only supporting and facilitating. So I would welcome again Ndolo, or any representative we choose, on behalf of the Public Debt Management Office, to just give a closing remark to the team, and then we proceed. Okay. So I have been told that when I grow up, I should go work at PDMO because I would make an amazing person there. So on behalf of the team, I would like to express our sincere gratitude, our sincere appreciation to each and every one of us. In absentia, but we have representatives from Treasury. Please pass our regards to the Honorable CS, who has taken his time to grace this event and to share his insights. Our regards and appreciation to the PS, Dr. Chris Kipto, for the insights, for the leadership, and even the blessings for us to be able to convene this team of amazing stakeholders. To the Public Debt Management Office, the leadership, the staff members, the colleagues, and the amazing team from Treasury, asanteni sana. Today, we have had representation from oversight and regulatory institutions, and we thank you very much for taking time to be with us, to participate in the discussions, and to share your insights. To our development partners who have been with us, we say thank you. We appreciate your time, we appreciate your contribution, and we look forward to strengthening the collaboration. To the various civil society organizations and non-state actors represented here today, tunashukuru. Thank you very much for taking time off your schedules, the different activities, to sit in and listen, and participate, and offer insights. And importantly, to take back a message so that from here, then we have actions that we want to take forward. To all stakeholders present, those I have not mentioned, those I have mentioned, each and every one of us, let us give just one clap to appreciate ourselves. I don't know if that was one clap, but we were going to do just one big clap. Thank you very much. As we come to the tail end, from the Institute of Public Finance, we appreciate, we will continue to engage. Equally from Treasury, all the windows and doors are open for engagement. Please reach out through the website, through the social channels. Please access the document. Read the full report. Read the abridged version. Ask those questions. Send those feedback. Send those remarks. We are looking forward to engaging PS Emeritus Muya on the ideas he has mentioned and making sure they are properly documented and forwarded to the right office that needs to take action to them. We look forward to engaging each and every one of you beyond this event as we continue to advance the principles of PFM as enshrined in our Constitution. I think we still have some breakfast left. Please do not leave hungry, do not leave thirsty, and importantly, network, meet and greet. I will welcome Victoria to close for us with a word of prayer.
All protocols observed, let's kindly stand and bow for a word of prayer as we close. Our dear Heavenly Father, God Almighty, in the name of Jesus, we bow in the fullness of your presence once again, lifting your name on high, exalting you, Jehovah God, for who you are. We sought for your guidance as we started this conference, this meeting, and God Almighty, you've granted it. You've granted us your goodness and your grace. We give you thanks and praise, O Lord, even as we disperse, as we go forth, God Almighty, to our other duties for the day. We pray for your guidance and your blessings. Lead us and guide us, and in all our endeavors, Abba Father, may your name be glorified. In Jesus' name we pray and we give thanks.
No.